We are at another episode. We are beginning another episode of the Soothing Semantics podcast. I'm your host, Rafi Pinsky. As always, make sure to subscribe, smash the like button, leave your comments. For all of your real estate needs in South Florida, residential real estate needs in South Florida, make sure to reach out to me at Rafi the Realtor on Instagram, or you can call and text, send an email. All of my information is on Instagram. Without further ado, we have the man with the great teeth. Someone I've been trying to get. See that? See those teeth? I've been trying to get in touch with him for a good trying to get in touch with him for like months now. He's a busy dude. We finally made it happen. And so Ashriel Moore is part of the Hebrew Israelite community in Dimona, Israel. Largest vegan community, I believe, in the world. They have the largest African American community outside of Israel. He really is a light for peace. I really hope to visit Ashriel's community sometime in the near future, because I do want to make a trip to Israel soon. It's been a little bit of time. So just more of an introduction. An ambassador, Africa Diaspora Collective. He's a spokesperson of the Hebrew Israelites, an advocate of social justice, and a consultant of African diaspora in Israel. So, Ashriel, welcome.
Rafi, thank you so much, my brother. With that type of introduction, there's nothing else that I could actually be able to say. Hold on, let me see. The internet connection seems to be unstable. Can you hear me pretty well?
I can hear you fine. Yep.
Okay, no problem. Because it will show me that it's unstable. But it's an honor to be on here with you, Rafi. Finally, we made it happen after so long that we've been trying. And please accept my apologies. It wasn't intentional, but my schedule is absolutely hectic. So sometimes things that I want to happen, they don't happen when I want them to happen, but they always happen when they're supposed to happen. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Absolutely, brother. And by the way, that's a principle of life. That's effectively man plans and God laughs,
Right.
We just got to keep going, man. I knew we were going to have this conversation, and I said if it takes some follow-up, so be it. I'm in sales. I don't mind a little bit of follow-up. I think
Well, the follow-up is good, to make sure that you're serious about it. You usually all too often we may try one time, it don't work out, and as far as we're concerned, okay, well, that's not what it's supposed to be. I guess it's not intended to happen, and so I'm just going to leave it be and just walk away from it. But that persistence is what actually, closes the deals, like as somebody who's in sales. So that persistence is something. I hope you're making a lot of money in sales because you're certainly persistent. But we
yeah.
made it happen, and here we are, man.
So, listen, not as much as I want to, but thank God, good. It's an upward trajectory. It's a long-term game, so
I
thank
mean, we
God.
have to start somewhere.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's been good. It's been a great journey, and I'm excited for the future. So, okay, so plenty of things to cover. How long ago did your family, and if we're being a little bit more general, when did the Black Hebrew Israelite community leave the US? And maybe they've come from other parts. Maybe, I mean, are there some from Canada? If you want to, throw that in there. There are some Hebrew Israelites that came from some other Western countries. But if they stem from America, if it was a family or a couple of families, what was the catalyst? How did this happen? How did these people just say, okay, we want to be so close to God, we're going to the place God may be, you know, spending most of his time, so to speak.
So let me just uh-oh. So let me just first of all add this into it, which I think is super important. The community's name is not the Black Hebrews, because I think it's very important since we're dealing with, like you said, soothing semantics. Language is very important. especially for people to be able to grasp ideas and also for them to be able to create associations in their mind. So it's important that we get the language correctly. The community's name is the African Hebrew Israelite Community in Dimona. And the greater movement of the Israelites worldwide, specifically in America, would be the Hebrew Israelites. Hebrew being from the lineage of Abraham, who we know was a Hebrew, and a lot of other prophets in the Bible who we know were Hebrews. So we know, for example, in Jonah, the first chapter, he says that Ivri Anochi ve'et Hashem ani yareh, which means that I am a Hebrew and I fear the God of Israel. We remember when the Hebrew boys were thrown into the fiery furnace. They changed their names from Daniel, Mishael, Azariah, and Hananiah, and to other names, right? But they were Hebrew boys. We know also that Moses was called a Hebrew when, first of all, the daughter of Pharaoh drew him from the water. She said that he seems to be a Hebrew, right? We know also that I mean, we can just go down the list. I don't want to belabor it, but that's very important to understand that the identity, the root of being a Hebrew, is not anything that we initiated. But then, secondly, when we say Israelite, we want to make sure that we're talking about how that lineage was actually passed down, because Abraham, he also had children outside of Isaac. He had Ishmael. Ishmael had children, but also Isaac had other children that were not necessarily just Jacob. He had also Esau, but the promise or the covenant was moved through Abraham, through Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. So we want to indicate who we're actually talking about when we say that we are Hebrew Israelites. And we know that the Israelite nation is made up of an entire 12 tribes, not just 2.5 tribes, because and most people associate being a Jew to two things. One, being somebody who had resided in Judea after the fall of the northern kingdom, and that was just the tribe of Judah, Levi, and Judah, Benjamin, and a bit of Levi. But you had another 9.5 tribes that were dispersed. And so when all these tribes come back together, we're once again going to be called by the name of the entire nation, which is the nation of Israel. Secondly, today people would associate being a Jew with someone who was born to a Jewish mother. But as far as we're concerned, when you look also through the annals of history, biblically, we also know that being an Israelite or being of the nation of Israel was always something that was patrilineal, which means that it was your father who had passed down the seed and who had indicated your identity. It wasn't your mother. And I know that people would say, well, during the period of time when Ezra and Nehemiah returned to Israel from the Galut, from the exile, then they had to clean house. And so one of the things that they did was they needed to get rid of all of the foreign women that were there. And so one of the ways that they were able to get rid of the foreign women and to determine who's going to actually continue in the seed of the nation, because a lot of the men had taken on these foreign women, they decided they were not going to recognize the children of the foreign women. They were only going to recognize the children of the women of Israel. And so that was where the idea of a matrilineal lineage had come from. But we can't change how the God of Israel had indicated what is going to be the continuation of the nation of Israel, and that was going to be through the seed of the Father. So that was very important for me to get that out, just so we could be able to have the language correctly. And then in terms of the community coming to Israel, what happened was when we were exiled out of Israel, the children of Israel had been dispersed to 4 corners of the earth. And we know by looking, for example, in the Talmud, when you see in Tractate Sanhedrin 95a, then it was asked to where were the children of Israel dispersed? And one of the answers were to Afriki, to Africa. Also, in another tractate, they was talking about three places that the children of Israel were dispersed to. Above the Sambation River, to back to the area um, of and the Chaldees and all of those, and number three to Africa, to Afriki. And so we trace our roots to those that had been exiled all the way back in 721 BC during the Assyrian invasion of the Northern Kingdom. And they settled in North Africa. They were in North Africa for a period of time, but we know that they also continued to migrate to other places all throughout Africa.
Can I interject quickly?
Yes.
Okay, again, like I said before, blunt question. When, how do I determine, or how does someone determine whether you had a group of, because this is a very, I think a lot of people may be thinking this. You have all kinds of Jews and non-Jews from different cultural backgrounds, all from all over the world, different skin colors, etc. What I do want to ask you is, how do you determine which people of African descent who who obviously look African, how do you know, or how could you figure which ones may have come from Israel and were exiled, which ones came from Africa, ended up in Israel? Like, how do you understand that, right? Because I acknowledge the story, I acknowledge your history. I'm just trying to make better sense of that.
Yeah. So my leader, the Honorable Ben Ami Ben Israel, always said that if you be of the seed of Abraham, you would have to do the works of Abraham.
Mm,
And so, how will we recognize if you're the seed of Abraham? Well, their customs, their traditions, there are there's history that people hold on to. And so, if you were not from that lineage, then we wouldn't be able to find within your customary traditions certain things that remind us of First Temple practices. If you were not from that lineage, if you have nothing to do with that whatsoever, then we would not be able to understand why do you celebrate Passover and others. You know, there are a lot of tribes throughout Africa, mainly on the west coast of Africa, who have practiced a lot of these things forever. And most of them don't even know where they come from.
mm,
You will see practices within the African tradition of specific tribes, and you would ask them where these come from. They would just say, this is just part of our identity. This is just part of our culture. This is just part of our tradition. And only later, when people started to investigate a little deeper, then they found that there was some connection. I'll just give you an example. In South Africa, you have the Limba tribe. Now, for a long period of time, people were not even looking at the Limba tribe. They really didn't even, I mean, that really didn't matter to them because for too long, there was no investments in trying to understand and unpack various tribal lineages within the sub-Saharan Africa that people speak about today. There was
mhm.
investments in Europe, there was investments in the East, there were investments in North Africa, there were investments in Arabian countries. But if the tribes of Israel were dispersed to four corners of the earth, and Africa is connected geologically, geographically, historically, culturally to Israel, then it would just make good sense that there would be a lot more communities in the African continent of 1 point something billion people, not just the Beta Israel Ethiopian community, which is a very
Mm.
small and minuscule portion of Israel, but we're talking about, they say that there are 15 million Jews today in the world. Well, if we're talking about 15 million Jews, and that means that we're specifically only indicating 2.5 tribes. So there are another 9.5 tribes. Those 9.5 tribes should be somewhere. They exist somewhere. How will we know where they are? Well, we would have to go through first of all, listen to people who say that they're from the tribes of Israel. I mean, they're not people who are just popping up and say that they're from the tribes of Israel because they don't know who they are, because they connect to the biblical stories because it sounds good. It's just a fantasy story that they were sold by some people who had come to proselytize them throughout the generations. And so as a result of that, they just took on this identity and they're usurping someone else's identity. No, no, no. These people know exactly who they are. So the first thing that we would have to do is listen to the people who say that they actually are. And then after we listen to them, let's hear their stories. And then after we hear their stories, let's look at their practices, their customs, their traditions. And then let's listen to their history. And then after we have all that information, then let's go and let's cross-reference that with a lot of the biblical stories that we know and with a lot of scholars who've invested a lot of time and energy in trying to understand and unpack a lot of these cultures, a lot of these traditions, a lot of these people. And then we could also look at a lot of the artifacts, the archaeological artifacts that people have. We could also look at a lot of the DNA markers that people have. There are a lot of ways for us to actually be able to identify who's who. And you know how I know, Ralphie, that there are a lot of ways for us to do it? Because we've done it in a lot of other places. You have the crypto Jews or the Marranos that were forcibly converted to Christianity in during the period of the
Inquisition.
that's my baby. During the period of the Inquisition in Spain and in Portugal. Now, how do we know that they have any connection to the tribes of Israel? Because they were forcibly converted. You have a lot of people who were first forcibly converted to Islam from the 7th century and going forward. How do we know who they actually are? We have a lot of people who converted or who absolutely detached themselves from any Israelite identity in Europe. They didn't want to be connected whatsoever because they wanted to simply just blend in with all the other Europeans because they believed that that would be a way that they could be able to be saved from the persecution they were experiencing. So how do we know who they actually are? Well, there have been people who've invested time and energy in trying to understand these communities, these cultures. There have been people who actually went through some of the artifacts to find something that could be able to give them at least an inclination that could help them, give them a clue that could help them to come closer to a very specific and clear determination. But why don't we do that with Israelites in Africa? That's a question that needs to be asked. But most certainly, we're not saying that everybody is, no, because are all people who live in Europe part of the House of Israel? Because you have
Definitely not.
Ashkenazi Jews. Are everybody who live in India part of the House of Israel? Because you have Bnei Israel. Are everybody who were from Iraq and Iran and other countries, are they also part of the House of Israel? Absolutely not. But how are we able to then indicate and understand from these from these large countries, small portions of people? How do we know? We know because we've invested the time and the energy and the research. All we have to do is just do the same thing in Africa.
Yeah, the one thing I'm going to say is with when it comes to certain groups of Jews, such as Ashkenazim or Sephardim or Mizrahim, some with their lineage, it tends to be a lot easier to trace back. You have a long list of rabbis, you have a long list of, books, traditions. There's a lot you can pretty quickly trace back, you know. But when it comes to, let's say, parts of like even the Indian tribes or the African tribes that are either Israelites, Jews, that's not always as easy. So I think that's kind of why it's, I guess, a little more complicated. I see Rudy Rachman. He's really trying to do that. I just If they're Jews, they're Jew, or if there is, however they see it, so be it. I'm also very on board with people wanting to convert if they're not Jewish. My whole thing is I'm cool with what he's doing as long as he's not actually proselytizing. Because to me, if I'm being very frank, I think there are cases in, let's say, parts of maybe Tanzania or Zimbabwe or wherever, where there are people that might be claiming they come from Jewish ancestry because they just want a better life. Like, I think they live in a country where there isn't much going on. They don't have a lot of opportunity. And if they're just Jewish and they can go to Israel and have a better life, it works for them. And I think his plan is to just increase the Jewish population by just bringing in as many Jews or people who claim they're Jewish that they can then bring in the Palestinians, the 5 million Palestinians that live in Gaza and the West Bank, whatever, 4 million, however many. No, it's probably like 3.5.
Uh,
Um, and then and then there's no issue with numbers anymore. The Jews have, let's say, 30 million Jews instead of 7 or 20, whatever it is. The numbers would be so much higher in Israel of Jews that we can absorb the quote unquote Palestinian numbers, and then we're not worried about not having a Jewish majority. That's kind of his idea. Um, and I'm just a little, my skepticism is just a little, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I totally hear where you're coming from, but my only caveat is I think maybe there comes a point where we're overreaching. Does that make sense? And it's not because and it's not because they're Africans. It's because we don't have, I think, nearly as much historical pointers as we do, let's say, with other groups. Do you hear what I'm saying?
I got you. I don't necessarily agree, and
Go on. Go ahead.
here's why I don't agree. Because the foundational principles of our understanding for
Mhm.
our identity is based in the Bible, right? Now, it clearly mentions in the Bible, if we look at the Psalms, the 83rd chapter and the fourth verse, it says that they have been confederate against us. And they've said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation so that the name of Israel will no longer be in remembrance. It means that they did a whole lot in order to disconnect the nation of Israel from their identity and wherever they may be in the world. And so clearly, they burned books, they exiled a lot of the scholars, they enslaved people, they persecuted people, people converted to other identities, trying to preserve their lives, and a whole lot of other things. And so it's clear that there has been a confederation throughout the generations of superpowers, specifically that wanted to disconnect the nation of Israel altogether from their heritage. And so there may be some places where there's more literature, more rabbis, more people who are able to or who've maintained a lot of the cultural tenets. And then there may be other places where you have much less. Now, the places that you may have more, that does not necessarily mean that they are more connected to their identity than other places, because way before the establishment of the state of Israel, you said that it's possibly one of the reasons that people are saying that they are of the house of Israel is because they would want a better life. Well, way before the establishment of the state of Israel, you have literature that was able to show you that a lot of these people who we're talking about now, um, they were. I mean, there's literature, there are researches that show that these people had been conducting a life that would be directly in connection with a lot of the first temple period customs and traditions, way before the establishment of the state of Israel was even, I'm talking about the 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, way before the establishment of the state of Israel. So these people didn't just wake up to it now. Now, one of the things I like about the name that Rudy has given his documentary is that we were never lost, because in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of people in the Jewish nation, in the eyes of people outside of these communities, people believe that they are lost, but they have been continuously maintaining a lot of these traditions and customs on their own, up in the hills somewhere, because they needed to flee the persecution. And then only now are we becoming accustomed or being exposed to what they have been doing. They're not doing it because they wanted some recognition. We came to them. They were
Right.
already conducting their lives. They didn't come and say, okay, there's a state of Israel, we want to go there. So they start reaching out to rabbis and asking, how could you be able to help us to come up? We went to them. People are going to them. People are going to research their identity. So That has nothing to do whatsoever with the state of Israel. And secondly, it most certainly is a matter of being African. And here's the reason why. Because in the 1970s, you had a Minister of Interior who was called Joseph Burg. And when they were talking about bringing some of the Beta Israel Ethiopian community members to Israel, he was absolutely against that idea. He said, I don't care what. And in 1974, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef actually signed on the Gushpanka for them actually being from the house of Israel. And even with that, they still did not allow the Beta Israel Ethiopian community to come to Israel. Only in 1984 did they start bringing some of them who had already started walking to Israel. Now, imagine, even before the Zionist movement started in 1895 with Herzl, you had a movement of return to Zion in Ethiopia under Abba Mahari. And this was in 1865. And one of the things that they wanted to do in coming back to Israel was they wanted to reenact that idea of splitting the Red Sea and then coming to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work out pretty well for them because a lot of them drowned, unfortunately. I mean, they were taking these ideas and they actually wanted to implement them in a way where it wasn't really compatible with the conditions of life that they were in, and a lot of them drowned. But nonetheless, they still wanted to do this. They were planning to come to Israel, but they've been having issues. Today, you have significant amounts of people who outwardly say that we're not Jewish. I mean, maybe our grandparents were, maybe our great grandparents were, whatever. And there's a clause in the law of return for Israelis that even with you having a grandfather or a grandmother who's Jewish, specifically talking about the Ashkenazi Jews in Europe, you're able to make Aliyah. And a lot of those people who are making Aliyah, these are people who are conducting Christian customs and traditions. They're absolutely disconnected whatsoever. They're married to people who are absolutely disconnected, have no connection whatsoever. They're coming to Israel because they want a better life. And the majority of these people are coming from Eastern Europe. They're not coming from Africa or
Fair.
whatsoever.
Very
And
good
there's
point.
and there's no issue. There's no issue with them. No issue whatsoever. So if that's the case, then, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. We're not talking about a small portion of people. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. And you see today, I mean, a lot of these people
Still
came and they
happens
established.
today. There's Jews from like people from Russia or Ukraine who have really not very much evidence that they're Jewish at all.
But they're coming.
Very true. Yeah, but I guess the only what I was saying is that in general the Ashkenazi history is very well documented. I think also now again I don't know enough about the African side. Like I know the Ethiopian Jews have history dating back to Sheba as far as I know. I don't know enough. I've done research. I mean I served in the army and had a couple of Ethiopians in Kfir with me, and I used to talk to them about it, and I used to get a relative understanding. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. I've read articles. I mean, like I have a fair understanding. But no, that's why these are questions I'm really curious to talk to you about. Yeah.
Not only with the Beta Israel Ethiopians, like I said, the Limba in South Africa, right?
Mhm.
They did research on them in South Africa, and they actually found that the Cohen chromosome gene is actually found in the clan, which is called the Buba clan within the Limba uh, um, community in South Africa. Also, you have the Igbo tribes in Nigeria, where it's been determined also by one of the Batedin that they also are connected to the House of Israel. And they've continuously for 2,000 years conducted a lot of these customs. They could tell you also about their identity and their migration to the area they're actually living in now. And as a matter of fact, a fun fact that people may not even know that about 30% of the people who were taken uh, from the western coast of Africa during what was called the transatlantic slave trade. that had brought millions of people into America. These people actually were taken from the Bight of Biafra, and they identified as Israelites, culturally, traditions, customs, heritage, and even genetic. Um, and they were taken into the western shores of Africa, along with 199 other tribes that had nothing to do whatsoever with Israelites. And
Mhm.
so this is why you hear today a significant amount of people who are waking up to their identity and saying that yes, we are Israelites who were brought into the the uh, uh, the Western Hemisphere and enslaved, but we trace our roots back to our ancestors who are still on the western shores of Africa. And you could go down there. I mean, you could go to Nigeria. You talk to the Yoruba and to the Igbo. You can go down to Ghana. You can talk to the Ga, to the Ashanti, to the Ewe. You could go down to Benin. You could talk to the Wida. During the 1700s, you also had maps that had shown that a lot of the people who had migrated, they had established for themselves kingdoms, small kingdoms that had continued to maintain a lot of those customs, and so they called it the Kingdom of Judah. You could be able to see maps from the 1700s. So there, I mean, there's a lot of literature also, of people. I would say Remy Ilona is one of the primary sources for understanding the Igbo Hebrew Israelite identity and how that actually connects to 2,000 years of continual customs. That they're the only ones that are actually continuously practicing a lot of these customs that other people in the world don't even practice anymore. There's and I mean, you talk to them and it's just amazing. It's incredible because you could see a direct connection for 2,000 years. But like, who's really investing any time and energy into really going and investigating this? I think,
Mhm.
Rafi, that if the more we investigate, the more we go into it, the more we would actually um, be exposed to this information, which we had no idea actually existed. But all we have to do is just invest the time and energy and the resources. And unfortunately, nobody's really investing the time and energy and the resources into that. And I really wonder why.
Yeah, no, I understand, and this is interesting. So I mean, do you think that there's going to be a mass aliyah of all these groups at some point? I mean, how does that work?
With the people who are currently in power in Israel, no, that's not going to happen. Um, and it's and as a matter of fact, I'm sharing this information with you, Rafa, because it's very important that we understand uh, what is the basis for this. And I've spoken to people who are very prominent, rabbis and people who've been investing a lot of time and energy, and getting down to the root of uh, the Israelite migration and the people who are still currently in the diaspora. And they said a few things that were very true. I mean, they said one that people don't invest a lot of energy into Africa. One, because of racism and that it exists. Two, because the fear of the other, right, of the unknown, because like you said, I mean, there's a lot of documented history in other places, and some places where they feel there's not enough documented history. And as far as they're concerned, they're afraid that people are looking to just ride the bandwagon, what I mean, and come to Israel and to enjoy all the perks that comes along with that. But they don't really have intentions on conducting, a lifestyle um, that is in alignment with the Israelite lifestyle, which I believe that's not even relevant in Israel because Israel certainly is not a country that is in alignment with the lifestyle of Israelites. I mean, it's more so aligned today with the Western liberal democratic principles, and it's going further and further away from a lot of those principles that the Bible is actually founded on. But now you're starting to see also there are a lot of people who are actually returning to the tradition. A lot of people are becoming more Masoretim now,
Right.
are strengthening, their identity and becoming more proud of it. Because for a long period of time, we wanted, and still today, we want to be known as part of the West. So we
Right.
want to participate in all of, all of the competitions. We want to be in the Euro League with the basketball. We want to be in the Eurovision with the singing, and we want to be part of the OECD. And we want, I mean, everything we want to be aligned with the West. But now I think that it's starting to trickle down to people that um, we are not the West. And as a matter of fact, the West is not really interested in having us, as part of them. So when you look at when you look at the United Nations, it represents mostly, Western interests. And you look at a lot of these human rights organizations in the West, and you look at, the Western media, and you look at a lot of Western countries that are denouncing Israel for the last 2 years plus. You're starting to see that people are saying that we're more isolated. It's not that we're isolated. It's more so that we're trying to cling on to, these ideologies and these peoples and these countries that is not necessarily in alignment with us. I like the idea of saying that we're going to reconnect, like Bibi said a few years ago. We're bringing Africa back to Israel and Israel back to Africa. That's an amazing idea. We are reconnecting with our brothers and sisters in India. That's an amazing idea. I mean, the West really does not have anything to contribute. I mean, with all due respect, the West, being in alignment with the West, it may have seemed like it's a good idea, but when you look at it today and you compare it with the values of what the nation of Israel actually is expected to represent,
Mhm.
they're in stark confrontation. They don't match so well. We want them to match, but they don't match so well. So I don't even, how do we even get to that?
We got to it, I think, when you were talking about these different tribes with this guy, with this minister, and
Ah,
yeah, and then it's still relatable. I understand how you got to this point already. You're pretty much talking about how, in reality, Israel and Jewish people, whether they're Jewish or not, but the idea of Israelites, Jews, Hebrews need to be more aligned with what Judaism and what the Bible actually wants of them to be, really in actuality more of a Middle Eastern culture. Um, and I think Western values have their place. I just don't think Israel should necessarily lead with that. I think there's room for it. I think there could be some level of cohesion, but I think the Israeli government has always put an emphasis on that. And I think that you're just trying to push as a round peg in a square hole, or a square peg in a round hole, and it you see constant issues with it. You see constant problems with it. I think that's why Israel needs to be focused on being a Jewish state first and a Western democracy second. And Israel has always been doing the opposite, and I think it's caused a lot of that's what's caused so many of the issues. It's why the Arabs haven't respected us. It's why we haven't been able to figure out what solution we want, you know? I think the Arab world is begging for us to be in more connection to Jewish values, because I think we would understand ourselves more, and then they could much more easily understand us and kind of figure out where we are, what our lines are, what our boundaries are, what our values are. We're kind of like, oh, the West, everything's okay.
do you know, Rafi, that actually, in actuality, when you look at it at the core,
Yeah,
the Western or the Eastern and also the Islamic values have more in common with the Israelite values than Western values.
I agree.
When you look at the core of the Islamic teachings and a lot of the values, now I'm not talking about the people who are the radicals who use that
Mhm.
information for other purposes, but I'm talking about the fundamental values. And I know that people are going to go in and say, yeah, but there's some places that are written where that you should, if you see a Jew hiding behind a rock, then you should get the
Oh,
Jew.
no, that comes from, I mean, fundamental Islamic values that aren't violent, that are non-violent, come from Judaism. So to say that they're not aligned would be ignoring the fact that they stem from Judaism. The only reason most of the Islamic laws that exist are effectively Jewish laws. Some of them were changed, some of them were added, but the fundamentals, modesty, praying several times a day, fasting, circumcision, no pork, the list goes on and on and on and on.
That's
These
right.
are Jewish values. So I mean, it's
You got
objective
more in
fact.
common. Yeah,
What
I
you're
mean,
saying is
it,
objective fact. It's not even an opinion, 100%.
but a lot of people don't look at it that way. A lot of people don't really understand that. They believe, as a matter of fact,
Lack of nuance, Ashriel. It's a lack of nuance because as soon as you
that's why I
say
think
that, as soon as you, and I heard it in your voice, as soon as you say that, people go, "What are you talking about? They're extremists." I do think that Islam took Judaism, unfortunately. They essentially took Judaism and twisted it because Muhammad, after once his army was strong enough, started to spew very anti-Jewish rhetoric. I think it became because it's really replacement theology. So it became we're the new chosen people, we're the new Jews. The Jews are obsolete now. They don't have a covenant with God, and so we're supposed to be violent against it. I don't think it's a matter of radical Islam or not. I think Islam has peaceful components and violent components, but if you're a devout Muslim and you're following it to a T, you kind of are commanded to not really like Jews very much. You have to be, if you want to have a true peace with Jews as a Muslim person, you kind of have to disregard or denounce components of Islam. This is just I mean, eh, I'll die on that hill, man. I don't mind Muslims, but I don't have a problem with Muslims per se. But the religion itself has to reform. Like it has to do a lot more reforming, or the people have to choose to look at it from a more reformed way. Like they have to go through somewhat of a renaissance, which I don't think they've done yet. I mean, many have, but many haven't. It's a bit
I
of a
think
rabbit hole, but yeah.
the issue, what I would say, Rafi, actually, is that religion is the problem generally. Religion, it could be Islam, it could be uh, Catholicism, Judaism, others, because as soon as you are looking at people through the prisms of your religiosity, and that's the way that you're going to determine the value systems, and on that basis, you're going to determine your connection to people, to languages, to cultures, to traditions, to countries, then that
Right.
automatically creates division. It's automatically going to cause you to be, even if you have things that are in common, right? But it's going to cause you immediately to have to look at the other person as the other. Now, if we
Right.
went to the fundamental principles of what, and this is why people are speaking so much now about Abrahamic religions, Abrahamic cultures, because a lot of those things stem from Abraham as the father
Right.
of what you would say the father of monotheism, the father of the three large religions. And so there were principles that Abraham implemented. And if we implement those same principles, and if we look at things through that same viewpoint, and if we do the works of Abraham, and I believe that a lot of the things that we're experiencing today as a result of, and it's not necessarily just the religions themselves, but it's also a lot of the interpretations of the religion. So you have the hadiths in Islam, and you have some things in the Mishnah and the Talmud, and you have some things in the Christian writings. That all of these things now make the water more murky, and us as human beings, where we didn't go all the way down into the rabbit hole to be able to extract the information and to look at the fundamental principles, but we're now understanding things through the interpretations that we've been fed. Now that takes us so far away from the foundation. Let's go back to the foundation. Leave the interpretations alone. Leave all of the, the mysticism and the develop. Leave that alone. Let's go to the source. Let's look at the source. And since we're all saying that we're connected to the same source, then there should be something in that source that will cause us now to be able to actually operate on the same value system. But people are not doing that today, and so as a result of it, it's like my religion is better than yours. It's really gang banging. My religion is better than yours. I'm better than you because I'm a chosen person. No, you're not chosen. I'm chosen now. No, no, you're no longer chosen. No, I'm chosen now. No, my prophet brought the final, you know, and then that just causes division. That there's no way that you can actually be able to get around it if that's the fundamental principles that you're operating in accordance with. Because why? Christians are going to tell you it's no longer about you as the nation of Israel has moved over now to the Christians. The Muslims are going to tell you that it's no longer about you being the nation of Israel. And all the prophets were great. They brought great information, great prophecies, but he's the final prophet. So what he's saying is actually going to trump everything else that they said before.
Right, right.
And so in that case now you have a mumbo jumbo of issues. There's no way that you could actually be able to overcome them because religion has caused so much division in the midst of people, and it's not about righteousness anymore. It's about religion, it's about gang banging, it's about who's correct, not because you're operating in accordance with our calling, for example, as Israelites, to be a light unto the nations and to bring forth tikkun olam, to repair a lot of these things that are broken. If this is not what we're trying to do, then what are we doing? I really don't understand. What is our purpose if we're not carrying out our responsibility as Israelites on this land, on this planet, in the midst of people where there's darkness and gross darkness is covering the people? If we're not bringing the light and we're not being the light and we're not helping to repair a broken world, then we're really obsolete in that case. What do you think about that?
I think it's beautifully said. I think it's beautifully said. I think replacement theology is an interesting thing because I think the reality is the Jewish people are always going to have a massive responsibility and they're always going to be judged often unfavorably for the burden of that responsibility because everyone kind of innately knows that we have such a responsibility, and so we're always looked at to perform it, to conduct it, you know. So we'll either be rewarded for it, we'll be punished severely for it, as we always have been. And I think the more that the Jewish people and anyone who identifies with Israel, who feels responsible and is responsible for the goal of tikkun olam and being a light unto the nations, the world's always going to be looking at us for guidance. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, they're going to point fingers and say, "Oh, you're just as you're no better than anyone else. Arguably, you're even worse." And I think if you talking about peace and getting along with other groups, the more we're living in our reality and doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, the easier it's going to be for other groups to do what they're supposed to do and for them to get along with us. So like you said, going back to being a Jewish nation, being an Eastern monotheistic, God fearing, God believing nation, the more people that can come back to that, I think the easier it'll be for us to have peace with our enemies. We'll be more in alignment with other people in the region. Um, Now, within all fairness, it doesn't mean we're going to agree with them on everything. I don't believe that Israel should be a theocratic country, but I think people on their own accord should be wanting to come back to more of that kind of life. Within listen, I want a country to be free. I want people to be able to choose. But again, on their own accord, I like to hope that people come back to those values. What do you think? Just quick, because I want to move on to the cultural thing between Hebrew Israelites, African Hebrew Israelites, and African Americans. That you remember we spoke about that before we recorded. Yeah.
And we can move on to that. I think that you summarized it incredibly. So
Thanks,
Go
man.
on.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks, Ashra. Okay. So, uh, there's been this really great shift in a lack of cancel culture. For so long, everybody was offended at everything. We couldn't say anything without triggering somebody. You were always worried that I better walk on eggshells because somebody I might get my Twitter banned or my Facebook banned, my Instagram banned. Now things seem to be pretty open. Speech, especially in the U.S., is very open, and this only happened in the last 6 to 12 months. So I'm seeing criticism of everyone. I'm seeing criticism of Jews, Black people, Arabs, Muslims, Christians. I'm seeing criticism of all kinds of people. Now, it's not a surprise, and it's very well known that a large portion of African Americans are below the poverty line. Mm, the majority of children are born out of wedlock, high violent crime. People know this, it's not a secret. Um, I'm curious to hear because it seems that the African Hebrew Israelites in Israel don't have that issue. Now, I don't know. Give me your, but I'm very confident that there's a nuclear home, two-parent households, religious upbringing, um, Hebrew Israelite values, the veganism. Now, I'm a big meat eater, but there's something I can respect in that. There's discipline. There's health consciousness. There's loving the environment. There's loving animals. There's a lot that gives me. So do a comparison of the two, not because one is better or worse, but I ask from you to be frank. I know you're going to be respectful because you're a respectful person, but be frank as much as you can without sugarcoating. Kind of why these two cultures are the way they are, even though they have many similarities, and what could be done, let's say, in the African American world in the US if they took on a lot more of the Hebrew Israelite values. What could that do? How could that help?
So that's an incredible question, Rafi, and I think that it's also important that we understand. Again, you can't really understand an issue unless you understand the basis, the foundation. You have to go to the source of it to understand how the things become actually the way they are. And so there are no other people on the planet who experienced. Well, first of all, let's say this: the entire Western capital, capitalist system is built on and founded on 400 years of free labor by people in the United States, South America, and Isles of the Caribbean. Point blank, period. That's the only reason why, because even going back, into history, Spain and Portugal had nothing to contribute to the world in the 14th century. What did they actually have? What did Queen Isabella, King Ferdinand, what were their contributions to the world at that point? Nothing whatsoever. They had nothing. But when they found out how they could be able to use this free labor now that they have in North America, in South America, in the Isles of the Caribbean, sugarcane, cotton, all of these things, which were very important commodities in that
Hmm.
period of time. And you had people who were plucking the sugar canes for free and the cotton for free. And all of these for 400 years, this labor allowed them to be able to get ahead. And so when the United States was established, right, you had all of those people would come in, over the centuries and establish themselves in America, building on this capitalistic society, but continuing to exploit the people of African ancestry who were there, and even up until 1860, 63, 60, between 1863 1865, when people say today about Abraham Lincoln that he wanted to abolish slavery because he was in favor of abolishing slavery for the purpose of doing so because he believed it was a good thing to do. That's not the reason why he abolished slavery. The reason why was because he wanted to preserve the Union. And so that was going to keep the North and the South in war, right? They had a civil war that was absolutely a catastrophe. So in order to bring things back to a Union state, then he abolished slavery. But now those people who were living, you had generations of people who even after enslavement for another 100 years, they still lived in conditions that were de facto slavery. When you look at, there were still people who were maintaining enslavement of people in the South, but they still didn't have any access to human rights, to civil rights, or anything of that nature. So you had the civil rights movement in the 1960s of people who were asking to be integrated into the society of America. But now these people had been in America now already from the 16th century all the way up until the 19th century for 400 years, and they hadn't even been able to live a dignified life. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Jim Crow was something that was acceptable. Separation. They said separate but equal, they call it, right? There were certain places where no black people allowed, no Jews allowed, and certain places in America. And you
Yep.
held this, you held on to this for so long. People couldn't really
It
get
was
proper
so
justice.
recent, by the way. I just want to say there's an area very close to me, about 30-minute drive. And I'm sure it's not only that, it was also Miami Beach. It was plenty parts of where I live in Florida now. I'm sure all of it at some point. I'm sure the entire state was like this. But I know for sure there's a city called Fort Lauderdale, 30 minutes north of where I live. 50 years ago, or maybe 60, well, it was in the 50s, so 70 years ago. 70 years ago, or maybe less, there were signs on stores that said no Jews or blacks allowed. And people were being people were hanged. Uh,
I'm going to get into that, right? So now, not only were they being exploited for so long, and they didn't have access to human rights and to civil rights, but anybody who wanted to raise their head above that condition and to try to work to abolish it, they were crushed. They were um, suppressed. I mean, it was so bad to a point where they wanted to make sure that they inflict so much fear in the hearts of people that for generations, and I don't know if you know so much about how trauma works, but trauma could actually be moved from generation to generation. And this is how it actually has been with the African American community. So now you have people who are being hung regularly. I mean, they
mhm.
call it strange fruits. You have people who are being burnt at the stake. I mean, this was an event. I mean, people will come out to watch a person of African ancestry actually being burned. You would have people who are being connected to two horses, and then you light the horses on fire, and the two horses go to separate directions and split the bodies of people. You had children actually being fed to alligators, babies being fed to alligators. You had women being raped in front of their family, their husbands, and there was nothing the husbands could do about it. You had people, and I mean, and this is just a small portion of what the people have actually experienced. And the purpose was to beat you down so low so that you could never, ever even want to try to rise above that condition of yours. And then even in the 1920s, when they had started building what was called Black Wall Street and wanted to actually do for themselves, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and other places, they said, okay, well, this society does not want us. So what we'll do, we'll establish something for ourselves in that case that could be able to service our community. So they had a chain of restaurants, chains of hotels, chains of busing systems, chains of internal structures that allowed people of African ancestry to be able to conduct their own lives, separated from America because America didn't really allow them any access to anything. And then in the 1960s, you had those people who were fighting for integration. There are a lot of people who were not for integration because the idea was that if we integrate now into the society, they would allow us now to have access to a lot of their systems. And as a result of that, our people are going to reject our systems because now you can be able to go to other hotels, so you don't have to come to our hotels. And so that de facto is going to break the foundation of what we've established. And that's exactly what happened. But not only did it break the foundation of what was established, the American government also, and the CIA and the FBI also did all they can do to break these systems down. So they burned Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they burned a lot of these other places, the Black Wall Streets or whatever, in order for them not to have access to anything that they can be able to do for themselves. And then later on, you had the COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program by J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI, who had said that the purpose of the FBI would be to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah that will strengthen and electrify the people of African ancestry in America and cause them to want to rise above this condition. And so he was trying to identify who were the people who could possibly be a Black Messiah for people of African ancestry. So he was looking at Elijah Muhammad. He said, "Oh, he's too old." He was looking at Marcus Garvey. What they do with Marcus Garvey, they broke his system. They broke down his operating system. They made up trumped up charges against him. They broke up his movement, moved him out of the country. You had all these other small organizations that also they did the exact same thing too. Martin Luther King, they assassinated him. Malcolm X, they assassinated him. The Black Panther Party, they broke them up. They assassinated the leaders. They were doing everything in order to prevent people of African ancestry from being able to rise above their conditions. This was something that was methodical. In addition to that, in the 1970s, another way that they wanted to break up the foundation of family was that they instituted the giving of the social welfare, right, to people of African ancestry in America. But how would you be able to qualify to receive that social welfare? You can't have a man at home. So you'll be able to get a governmental stipend from the government now, but in order for you to qualify for that, you cannot have a man at home. And
Yeah,
so
they're incentivizing lack of father. Yeah, they're making it
they,
why bother? Why commit? Why work out? Why work on a relationship? You might as well just be single. You'll probably get more benefits that way.
you
Yeah.
get more benefits that way. You get benefits from housing. Say, for example, you're able to live in a house, right, that costs $2,000 a month because you're getting subsidies of $1,700 from the government. So all you have to pay is $300. But now the trick to it is that you can't have a man at home. You could be able to, get access to certain jobs and otherwise by being a single mother and otherwise. So you don't need to have a man at home. And so they incentivize that. And it wasn't that the men didn't exist or were not there, but one of the ways where they were actually trying to circumvent the men also was that they wanted to implement these, because even later on they had certain incentives that if you were a woman and if you were Black and if you were this and if you were that, then you would be able to have access to a lot of the governmental systems. So now you qualify for everything now because you're a woman and you're Black and you're a minority. So you certainly don't need to have a man at home because the man is going to mess up all of these things that you're now able to have access to. And so that brings us up to 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and beyond. All of these things were methodically planned out. You have
Mhm.
the system where you have the pipeline from high school to prison for people of African ancestry living in specific neighborhoods. You have the red lining that if you live in a specific neighborhood, say, you give your zip code, and they're all automatically able to identify you as living in this certain area. And as a result of that, then you don't qualify for uh, certain things like a line of credit, and you
Right.
can get certain jobs. And then even they could 1994, Bill Clinton implemented the three strikes law, right? Three strikes and you going to jail. Now, even if it was the smallest, I mean, you could have did the smallest thing, but you have three strikes now. Now you're going to jail. And so this mass incarceration and changing over the prison systems from being systems that are supposed to reform you to actually private enterprises now. And these private enterprises are now able, based on the what is it? Is it the 14th Amendment that says that slavery is not or slavery should be abolished only if or something slavery is possible. Pull it up for me. The 14th Amendment. Can you get that for me?
Yes.
Because I want to make sure that I'm on it exactly.
Well, you mean like to do a screen share?
No, just read it for me
Just
if
just
possible.
read it for you. Okay, hold on. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
Okay, so it wasn't that. Read the Fourth Amendment for me, because there's one amendment to the Constitution that says that slavery is actually something that could happen. I mean,
Here,
that is
I know what to do. I know what to do. Explain what the amendment constitutes. I'm recording. I'm putting my phone on ChatGPT on
okay.
record, and it'll be able to pull it up. Just to the best of your memory, just kind of explain it.
Okay. So there was an amendment to the Constitution that allows for the enslavement of people who are in prison. Which amendment to the Constitution is that exactly?
Amendment you're thinking of is the 13th Amendment to the United States. What it says,
Okay, so
it,
13.
it abolished slavery with one key exception. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. What that means in practice, slavery and forced labor are illegal for free citizens, but forced labor can be required of prisoners after conviction. This is the legal
Okay.
basis for prison labor in the U.S. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now think about that and then think about who is the largest population that is actually populating the prisons in America?
African Americans.
African Americans. And they're in there and they're working free labor, right? Because these prisons
Yep.
are effectively private owned businesses now. So now you're putting
Yep.
all these people in there, not because they're actually criminals, but so that you can be able to have free labor. And then the 13th Amendment is allowing you that right. So you now have the high school to prison pipeline. So once they finish high school, let's make sure that we do all this possible to be able to make the conditions so severe that people will be involved in even some of the most minute crimes. I mean, some crimes that other people would never be taken in for. But people of African ancestry, African Americans, have been. And so as a result of that, now they're being shipped off to prison. So
Okay.
good.
No,
You got a
no,
question?
no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your point. I feel like.
Okay. So, so it's important to understand all of this when you're looking at the condition of people of African ancestry in America. When you're looking
Mhm.
at all these people who are coming from the outside, all of these minority groups or whatever. At one point, we were talking about civil rights, right, for Black people in America. But then all of these other groups hijacked it, and now we're not talking about Black people. We're talking about colored people. Colored people could mean Indian to everybody who is not identified as white in
Mhm.
America is identified now as colored people. And so now you're able to give all of these other groups of people who are coming as immigrants and others to America and coming in even illegally. you are prioritizing them above the African Americans in America. So these conditions were created and they're maintained. This is not anything that, that is just happened haphazardly. So when you're looking at the community in Dimona, what we did was that we had to break out of that system and to create our own system. We had to leave America, first of all, come back home, come back to Israel, to reconnect ourselves spiritually with the land that we had come from and with our identity as Israelites. And in the midst of that, also establish a community or an environment, a society, which we call the kingdom of God. Now, what does that mean, the kingdom of God? It means an environment that is based on the fundamentals of what we would attribute to God. So we say God is love. We say God is peace. We say God is justice. We say God is serenity. So all of these things now, we take them and actually implement them into a society which we call the Village of Peace today. And so that Village of Peace then will also need other structural components to be able to ensure that it could be able to operate as a unit. So what we established then are institutions. So these institutions will be able to then service the people of the community. And so you have an institution, say, for example, like the Ministry of Health. So the Ministry of Health is responsible not for ensuring that we could be able to take care of you in case of you getting sick, but it is in trying to implement a system that could be able to prevent you from being sick so that we won't need to take care of you. So we practice preventative medicine, right? We have a school. This school now is a school that would allow us to be able to focus on real life uh, real life work ethics that could allow you to be able to learn trades in the school and then allow you to be able to leave the school not just with practical knowledge or with theoretical knowledge, but with practical things that you could actually go directly into the workforce with. We've established our own birthing center in the community where 100% almost of our children that were born in this birthing center naturally. We have an organic health food store in the community that we are practicing organic veganism, right? So the food, it's not just about the food, it's about working out at least 3 times a week, making sure our bodies are still in good health. It's about taking certain supplements daily to ensure that we're getting everything that we need. It's about having a deep tissue massage at least once a month. It's about every quarter of the year not eating any foods that are cooked for an entire week and not eating any sweet foods for an entire week. It's about ensuring that we're also taking care of our mental health. So if we need assistance or whatever, we need to have people that we can go to get counseling, to get assistance. All of these things are what we've implemented in this community. And so the only difference between the community here and the African American community in America is that we managed to be able to escape a lot of what they have been experiencing and to establish our own reality where we are in control of the reality, and we don't need to have people on the outside dictating for us. And even though it's been a challenge because the Israeli government didn't really welcome us initially, and we've been fighting politically for 50 years now, but nonetheless, we still established everything that we need to establish so that we could be able to ensure that we could service ourselves. So there's a lot of the things that our people are experiencing in America, they don't exist here in this society because we built that society on these fundamental principles, understanding that we're coming from an environment that has caused us to be suppressed. But now we're going to establish our own environment that we're going to be in control of, that nobody's going to be able to prevent us from having access to, to things that are very, very needed, and to incentivize our people to not be married and to reject our children and otherwise, because the woman needs to go out and work. She doesn't have a man. So who's raising her children? The streets, basically. But we established a community that the community is raising our children. So that means that if you are not there, then the next door neighbor will assist with your children. That means that if you need something specifically, you could be able to count on, the community leadership. That means that if, because we're all given 10% of our income, then if you are a family who have more children, Baruch Hashem, and unfortunately something happened where you can't work or your husband passed away or whatever it is. And I noticed, firsthand because we are 15 children. From my mother, we're 10, and her first husband passed away when they were just in their 30s, and my father passed away when I was 16. And so my
Okay.
mother still had to go out and work. Um, and so my siblings were the ones who would actually raise me. But imagine if you didn't have that. So who will raise your children? I mean, if you're in a society that is not a communal a society, then who's going to assist you? Nobody's going to assist you. And so this is
100%.
what we established actually in the community. So that's the only difference. We took our destiny into our own hands, where the great majority of our people in America are not able to do so in the current conditions they're living in.
Okay, well, first, little quick thing, because you mentioned our people. Do you feel completely connected uh for how do you, because you're saying that you're an Israelite, that you're a Hebrew, that you originate from the land of Israel. Are you implying that all of the African Americans do as well, or are you just saying this as a black person? Like where's the connection? I'm just trying to understand that part.
So, so when I say our people, I'm speaking specifically about the African Americans in America. But I'm not
Got it.
saying that everybody stems from the Israelite, culture or from the Israelite identity or heritage. But I am saying again that at the least we can know at the least because 30% of the people who were sold into slavery during the transatlantic slave trade were actually Israelites, then I assume that at least 30% of the people today in African American society are people of Israelite heritage.
Okay, okay. Gotcha. Uh I hear what you're saying as far as institutions, groups of people, individuals trying to keep Black Americans down. There's a lot of benefit for them to do so. So they create scenarios and create mechanisms that don't allow them to succeed. Now, with that said, Jewish people, now when I say Jewish people, I'm talking about all kinds of Jews, whether they're from any kind of background. They have experienced different challenges. Ashkenazim, Mizrahim, Ethiopians, etc. They've all experienced different historical challenges, what have you, but nonetheless have been severely persecuted, arguably more than anybody. What about them? Because there were also in tons of institutions in all parts of the world that barred Jews from owning certain businesses or owning land or doing this and doing that. But like the Hebrew Israelites in your community in Dimona, they realized that the institution would always screw them and that they needed to develop their own communities, their own institutions, and that would help them. So, why have the Jews been able to do this in the US, but it's been so hard for African Americans? Because they're, I think the Jewish people have what they've done in the US is they've become so independent, they've become so powerful and so influential that even people who hate them can't stop them. The only way they can stop them is if they go into the neighborhoods and literally with pitchforks or, God forbid, weapons and they try to hurt them. But in terms of trying to bring them down economically, the Jews are not going to fall for it. You know what I'm saying? Like they can't start bringing in crappy fast food. The Jews primarily eat kosher, and the ones that don't eat kosher are not going to be running to McDonald's every day. You can't, there's just a lot of stuff that won't work. You can't convince Jewish families, oh, don't have nuclear families, don't have two-parent households. We'll give you government benefits. The Jewish communities are going to say, we're not falling for that. We have donors, we have people with money in the community that'll help us. We're not going to stop having, we're not going to stop getting married and have. So, what have Jews been able to do, like how have they been able to do this? But African Americans in the US are having such a hard time just saying, we're tired of you helping us because you're not actually helping us. We need to do it on our own. Why are they having such a hard time doing that?
So one, we're starting to see that more and more people. And
Yeah,
because when you say African American, right? Again, these are people who had come from 200 different ethnic groups
sure.
and brought into America. We're talking about a history of 400 years that cannot be overlooked. We're talking about, in addition to 100 years of legal separation, of legal apartheid in America. Talking about just 70 years ago, 60 years ago, these people were given even the rights to vote. I mean, something as fundamental as that. Able to live in certain neighborhoods, some fundamental as that. And the initially the Jews who had come to America in the 1800s, who were fleeing persecution in Europe and Russia and other places initially, they had the same issues that people of African ancestry were having. They had come to America. A lot of them also were not given access to a lot of the institutions, but there was a fundamental difference. Fundamental difference was they were not, when they came to America, they were not enslaved.
Hmm.
They were able, and even some of them had slaves in the South and also in the North. They had slaves, so they were able, and some changed their names, for example, so they were able to pass as white people, right? Um, Black people, I mean, you can change your name all you want. You're still going to be recognized as a black person. They still see you, like I see you. You can't change it. Um, they also had come and established community, right? They established communities, like you said, because there are certain things that they needed to be able to have that in other places they couldn't have. So even though even in Europe when they were being persecuted, they established the shtetls and other places where they were able to within themselves, even if they were operating on the bare minimum, there are still things as far as their culture, as far as the tradition, as far as the value system that they maintain inwardly. Right? We're going to
Right.
disconnect from the world on the outside. So they brought a lot of that to America with them. And so a lot of people from in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, they were actually working hand in hand together with African Americans to overcome the conditions, because the same conditions almost that African Americans were experiencing after slavery has been abolished, and now they're working on getting civil rights. Jewish people, I'm specifically talking about the Ashkenazi Jewish people, because you also had black Jews, you also had Mizrahi Jews or whatever, but specifically Ashkenazi Jews. They were working hand in hand with the African American community, and because those things were also affecting them. And then until a significant amount of them got to a point where they no longer needed to work with the African American community in order to overcome a lot of these differences, because now they no longer were faced with that. Just like, okay, I've come this far. Now I don't need to be with you with all of this fighting for rights and all, because I'm good. So thank you so much, but I'm going to abolish this cause. I'm not going to work with you anymore. No, thank you. And then, some of them got access to, say, for example, uh, uh, shops and real estate and others, and they were exploiting the people of African ancestry, especially in New York and Harlem, because a lot of people were moving out when African Americans started moving from the South up north, Chicago, New York, and otherwise. Then a lot of people who were living in these places didn't want to live in. First of all, they didn't want to live around black people, and secondly, the price or the value of the communities had started to decrease. So they were leaving out, but the Ashkenazi Jews were coming in. So they were
Right.
able to, they had already established themselves well enough to be able to, buy some of the apartments and buy some of the stores or whatever. So they hiked a lot of the prices also. Why did they hike the prices? One of the reasons why they hiked the prices because living in, certain neighborhoods or whatever, as far as they were concerned, they were not going to be able to get insurance for certain things. The insurance was a little higher. So as
Right.
far as they were concerned, they had to hike the prices. And so Black people in America had saw that as exploiting us, right? And we thought that we were friends, with it, we were working together. But now you all, kind of got ahead a little bit. You left us behind, and not only you leave us behind, you are now starting to act the same exact way like the people who we were fighting against together. Like you're
Right.
exploiting, you've become the people who we were fighting together. So now,
Right.
you left us behind. That was an issue. And then the Jewish communities started establishing, certain things that would allow them the ability also to be able to make it. So, okay, you don't want us to operate in certain fields? Not a problem. We'll establish our own fields. We'll establish the film industry, for example. We'll establish Hollywood. We'll establish a whole lot of other things that will allow us to be able to do what we need to do to feed our families. So we're
Mm.
not going to be totally dependent on you. We're going to establish communities in certain places, and we're going to have these communities um, invested in by our people wherever we are in the world. I think that's one of the things that are most incredible within the Jewish community, that people come together.
Yeah.
People understand the importance of supporting each other. People understand how when $1 comes into the Jewish community, it circulates 7 times within the community before it leaves. Wherein in other communities, specifically, let's say African American community, it circulates maybe about a half an hour and then it's out.
Right.
7 times within the community. That means that, Rafi, I'm buying from you. You're buying from this person. This person is buying from this person. This person is buying from this person. This person is doing business with that person. It gets back to me. And then the money leaves the community, possibly. But like everything is done internally. So you need, and we see it also today. Okay, Rafi, you working in real estate. We need a lawyer. Okay, we're going to get us a Jewish lawyer. The Jewish lawyer also needs to, be connected to people who understand landscaping. So we need a landscaper. Let's get our brother. Then, okay, landscaping or whatever. Now you need somebody who is working within, I don't know, another field or whatever. Let's get that, brother. And now we have a few people who are working in the same field. So now I'm able to give you
There's
the,
no doubt.
be able to pass it around. This is something that's incredible in the Jewish community. So that's the main difference. We haven't figured out how to work also together for the purpose of uplifting our entire community. There's certain people who make it, and then they're just celebrated as individuals. But in the Jewish community, we don't make it. You all don't make it until everybody's making it. You
Mhm.
all are not going to leave anybody behind. And that's something that's incredible. And so the reason why, again, all of these things that I've just laid out, these are the differences between the various communities. So this is why certain people could be able to make it and progress when the African American community is not. But there's a caveat here. We can do it because we've shown the example of the Village of Peace in Dimona. This is a model community for what we could be able to actually establish. And so what we're doing now in the community in Dimona is taking this model and replicating it. We're going to start replicating it in other places in America to be
Oh,
able,
that's tremendous,
yes, sir.
tremendous work.
Yes, sir. Taking the idea, taking the principles, taking what we established, taking, the good and the bad and everything that we learned, and implementing these things throughout. I'm going to actually be speaking in Atlanta next month. Now I don't know when this is going to come out, but I'm going to be
Tuesday.
speaking.
This is gonna be out. This is gonna be out this coming Tuesday. Yeah.
So I'm going to be speaking in March in America to this big HBCU and legislators conference or summit. And I'm going to be speaking about the importance of using the model that we built in Dimona to implement and to replicate these things throughout the communities in America with African Americans. So, how do we manage to deal with the chronic ailments that our people are experiencing in America? What did we do? What kind of foods are we consuming, and what do we leave behind? Like you said, McDonald's. Our people are consuming poison and killing themselves,
Hmm.
right? We have to change that mentality. Obesity in amongst our people, this individualistic mentality and mindset. Um, the communities, we need a safer place for our people to be able to live. We need the communities not to be just a neighborhood, but we need it to be a community. We need it to be a village. We need everybody to look out for one another. How do we implement these things? We need these things to be the kingdom of God. All of those principles that we attribute to God, we need to be able to see these things actually happening in the communities in America and in other places in the world. So we're taking this model and we're going to replicate it in other places to show that we indeed do have the ability to do what we need to do for ourselves and not be dependent on any external sources. Whatever we can get from external sources, great. But we're not going to allow external sources to dictate for us what we can and what we can't do, which they have done up until now because we've been totally dependent on them. So now we don't need to be dependent on anybody but ourselves to do what we need to do for ourselves. Whatever we can get from the outside, great. But we need to come to the table now and create partnerships, right? As opposed to us being dependent on other people and allowing them to exploit us or allowing them to dictate the terms of our relationship based on them being the ones who are bringing the majority of the resources to the table. So, it's a different ball game in this day and time, Rafi.
Tremendous. It's huge, man. I hope it'll bring much success. I hope it's not something that's just a speech and that the people in the community that are listening to you don't implement because it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work. I mean, the role models are terrible. The culture is really in many parts of the United States, like, you know, gang banging culture, rapping, materialism. These are things that are admired. These are things that are exalted, so to speak. They're put up on this pedestal, and that's what everyone wants to be. Like I've watched. I don't know if you've seen on YouTube these like hood videos, these documentaries. You'll have guys going into different hoods all over the U.S. and they interview people.
Send me a few of them. I haven't seen them.
You could just look up hood vlogs, and you'll have these different guys going into like the roughest neighborhoods in Minnesota, Tennessee, Wyoming, every state in the United States. And they'll go there and they'll interview locals from these communities. And you see that there's no other way to put it. It's this childishness just because they don't know any better. That's their environment, and there's no one there to help them. And it's just they aspire to do things that are going to destroy their lives, and you have full communities of young men and women who think this way,
Mm.
and you're just watching the next generation flush their lives down the toilet. You're just seeing it happen. And if only they had the right role models, things would change so much. Like there'd be such a massive change. And you couldn't do that to the Jewish community. What I mean is the Jewish community is so solid. It's been solid for so long. You can't say, oh, you should exemplify such and such rapper or such and such celebrity. The Jewish community is going to be like, what are you talking about? We don't want anything to do with these people. These people have no, like if a Jewish guy in a highly populated Jewish area in New York or Miami or California said, I'm going to grow my hair out. I'm going to dye it orange like a rugrat this big, color, get gold grills on my teeth, and I'm going to start rapping about whatever it is. The Jewish community would pretty much ostracize him. If they didn't physically kick him out, they'd be like, I don't know what you think. None of us have any interest in you whatsoever. Best of luck to you. Have a nice life. Nobody would care about him. He'd be irrelevant.
Mm.
He wouldn't have any influence. But unfortunately, people like that in the black community have tremendous influence. And these people need to stop having the influence. They need to be made irrelevant. I think that I don't want to I don't want to sound like I'm preaching because it's like, again, it's not my place. I didn't grow up in this community. I'm clearly not African American. But to me, it's not about the color. It's just these negative role models will influence any group of people terribly. Um,
So let me just give you the backdrop on that also.
yeah,
It's not necessarily, it's not about them being the role models for the community,
yeah,
but it's more so about people who've managed to climb up out of the conditions that the great majority of people have been in.
Yeah,
And it's not just so you could know, the music that is being created, this and the purpose of pushing these people, this is actually something that's engineered, right?
I
It's
know
not,
that. I know that. I know that. And
yeah,
I know that, and there's been unfortunately Jews involved in the music industry I
that,
know
that,
this.
that, that's what I was going to share. So these things have been are being engineered, and so you have people who are looking at these individuals as role models because they managed to be able to break through the glass ceiling, quote unquote. So they managed to be able to get out of the hood and buy their mothers a home and to show, what are the perks of success and what possibilities exist if we're able to climb up out of this condition. Now, this could also be done with intellectuals. Now, don't get it mistaken. The people who are in the sports and entertainment world are not the only ones who have an effect on the black community. And as a matter of fact, they're not even the ones who have the greatest effect on the black community. It's always been mostly the intellectuals who had an effect on the black community. The people who you're speaking about specifically, these are people mostly people who are in the worst of the conditions in America, and like I say, it's orchestrated that way, and they're holding on to the communities in that manner. They need people to work for free, so they need people to be in these. When they look at certain neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods don't get like that just because people are living there. Somebody's not coming to collect the garbage. Whose responsibility it is to come and collect the garbage? They're not coming to collect the garbage. Um, uh, why are some of the houses, not being redone? I mean, they look like they've broken down or whatever, but you have, the city that's responsible for upkeeping certain places or whatever. Why don't they do that in certain neighborhoods? They don't want to be bothered. They don't go
Well,
in there.
Ashra, the only thing that I have to say is I understand that there are absolutely people who want to keep them in that position because they benefit from it. The only issue I have is
Systems. It's not people. There's systems. So even if the people are no
right.
longer there, right, the systems continue to operate in that way. Now,
Yeah, but it's at some point individuals need to decide if we don't make a change, it's not going to change. Even though a lot of it is there to benefit from harming us, they're likely not going to change that. Meaning it has to change from us despite all that going on, which is very hard to do. But this is just what I feel is like at some point it has to be like, you know what, if you're not going to help us, if you're going to actively seek to harm us, then we need to do everything to put a barrier between us, or at the very least, do everything we can to get together as a community and not allow what you're trying to do to affect us. Easier said than done, very difficult, but it's just I don't see another way.
well, I mean, there's no other way. We have to take our lives into our own hands. I mean, like I say, what we did in Dimona, Israel, is a great example for what can be done in other places and how to replicate that. But remember, these things are happening. I mean, these are plagues, that are
Yeah.
plaguing our people. And when you look in the book of Deuteronomy, for example, from starting from the 15th chapter all the way to the 68th chapter, then it breaks down a lot of these plagues that people are going to be experiencing. And if you look at the conditions of people in America, African Americans, then you compare them to a lot of what these curses are expected to, be, then you could be able to see that these things have been inflicted on a significant amount of the people in America. There are a lot of other plagues also that have been inflicted on people in other places in the world. But specifically, when we look at the conditions of people in America of African ancestry, these conditions have been orchestrated and they're working, and these systems are strong. And 400 years of enslavement, and like the Constitution says also, that they recognize Black people in America to be three-fifths of a human being. All of that can be undone in a generation or two. That's going to take a long time to do, because that generational trauma is passed on from one generation to the other. And so every generation now is dealing with, first of all, playing catch up, right?
Right.
You playing catch up, and you're so far behind. Imagine, Rafi, for a moment, that if you were born into a condition that the school that you're going to, for example, that you have the financial capabilities to go to, is so far behind that when you finish, it's almost like you didn't even go to school, and everybody else your age is like college level, collegiate level. By the time you go through those systems to be able to get yourself up to par, then everybody else again are so far ahead. So you have to work now times 10 harder within the same period of time that other people are working regular in order to be able to make up that difference,
Well,
right?
can I add something?
Right.
I I didn't grow up in a hood. I had it objectively better than many in the US. I grew up without parents. I grew up with a single grandmother. And this isn't a
Yeah.
comparison game, just to give you some perspective. I grew up, my grandmother made about maybe 30,000 a year. She made a very tiny sum of money. She did data entry. We were still part of the Jewish community. She had help. There were friends and community members and things. I'm sure the yeshivas, I went to private school, I went to Jewish private school. I didn't go to a wealthy school with all these extracurriculars, and if I didn't go to fancy, but I went to like small little private schools. But I had all my needs met. I had clothes, I had shelter, I had everything. We didn't have a car. I didn't go do any traveling. I didn't go on a plane until I was 18. Didn't grow up with any siblings. Spent most of my life in a basement, tiny little basement apartment. We had enough to get by, but my grandmother was always paycheck to paycheck. Um, and compared to a lot of Jewish guys my age, there are plenty of Jewish families that have generational wealth. Their families own real estate. Some of these guys are going to have huge inheritances of either a few hundred thousand or millions of dollars. Their families pay for the weddings. Their families will always have their back if anything happens. They're never going to be on the street. Whereas, my mom passed. I never met my parents, but my mom passed. My grandmother passed a few months ago. I don't really have any immediate family. I have no family in Florida. I have a little bit of family in New York. I have a ton of family in Israel, actually, and they're great. None of them are wealthy. I don't have anyone wealthy in my family. Nobody. Um, so,
You got to be the
so
first one.
yeah, then that's the plan. But I didn't exactly. I was not given a silver spoon. Anyone who knows me will tell you that. And what I've realized though is it's going to take me, objectively speaking, a lot more effort to get to where many Jewish guys in a major city in the US, they're way ahead of me financially. I mean, they might be much lazier than I am. They might not have the ambition that I have. And I think that's a massive component, but they can just sit on their ass and they're good to go. Their father might have shown them how to buy real estate in their early 20s. They just because their families know business, conducted business for generations. They were growing up with the knowledge. I had to develop the knowledge over the course of my life. This There might be a kid named Shmuel who at 5 years old at the dinner table was listening to his father talking about real estate investing and it was absorbing in his brain. I didn't know that stuff until I was 25.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that I'm very late to the story in many respects compared to a lot of these Jewish guys, Jewish girls. And that makes it harder for me. But it's all relative. Like there's always going to be somebody who's got a leg up in life, but I think it's also about how much you want it, and it's easier said than done. Some people just they're entire. I was also blessed to be in a Jewish community where even though I grew up much less economically, I was friends from a young age with some Jewish kids who came from my friend. I had a very close friend that lived across the street from me, and his parents
Yeah.
did very well. So even though I grew up poor, his parents had no problem with us being best friends. So
Right.
I would be around his parents and I would get invited to Shabbat dinners in his nice house. Meanwhile, I'm poor as hell. And so that Jewish community allows for those differences to matter a lot less because we don't judge each other as much for that. Yeah, there's judgment. Yeah, you're like, oh, you're not from this family, you can't marry my daughter, blah blah blah. You have that stuff going on, but it's much less of an issue. It's more about, oh, you don't have that opportunity. Let me teach you. Oh, you don't know, your family didn't know about real estate. Okay, cool. I see you got the hunger for it. Let me bring you in. Let me show you how to buy multifamily. So I think the successful African Americans, the successful Black people, the ones who did make it in any realm, they got so much to give to the others. But there's this culture of like, as soon as I make it out, as soon as I don't have to be in that environment, I'm gonna go live in the white neighborhood. I don't want anything to
Right,
do with you guys.
right.
Um, you know? Yeah, but anyway, end of rant.
No, no, I mean, look, you're strengthening my point. That the importance of community,
Yeah.
right? The importance of you having people in your immediate surroundings you could actually look up to, as people who you aspire to be, not somebody who's on TV and so far away or whatever, but people who are right there in the community, people who are continuing to uh, to provide to you a level of confidence and understanding of you being able to actually make it out of your current condition. And this is not anything that you have just been born into and you're going to die like this. You actually understand that it takes a system to be able to develop people. We individually, neither of us are anything. We need a system. We need, we need a colony. We need a group. We need a family. We need a community. And this is
The Jewish
something.
community say, bro, I would never have been able to do. I can look at so many points in my life where I would have not been able to progress if I didn't have a Jewish individual or a Jewish community or a rabbi that I was able to consult, confide in, ask for assistance with something. There were struggles. I had some business struggles and different ups and downs where I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be man enough to admit that I need assistance or help with something. And because I had enough balls to do that, it really helped put me in the next position.
Mhm.
It helped me climb a rung on the ladder where I could now catapult from that, you know? And just because I had a resource that should be uh provided or used or whatever, and then you give back. That resource is accessible to you, you benefit from it, and you say, now that I was able to benefit from it, what can I give to someone else? How can I uh move that forward? How can I provide that help to someone else in need? And then there's just this beautiful rotating circle, and everyone's helping each other out. It's
I mean, and that's what we managed to build in Dimona also.
right.
So our people are playing pickup or catch up. You know, and I mean, we managed to do what we built in Dimona for 50 years. It took us a long time to do so. It
I
wasn't
mean, look at
easy.
you, look at you in that comfortable ass looking chair. You
Oh,
got
come
teeth.
on, man. Oh, this is just something easy, man. Don't look at it like that.
Bro, those Colgate, bro. Your teeth. Look at your teeth compared to mine, bro.
It's the camera, man. It's the camera. It's the camera. Uh, but um, but yeah, I mean, the community is everything. Community is everything, and having that structure around you that could be able to help you to rise, because none of us could be able to rise above the condition of our community, of our people. And my leader, uh, and I'm going to bring him into the conversation continuously, the Honorable Ben Ami Ben Israel, he said that as an individual, he's nothing. He was just a great individual because he was part of a great people.
Mm.
People talk about him worldwide today. Some people have good things to say, some people have bad things to say, and they can say whatever they want to say. But at the end of the day, he was an incredible human being because of him coming from an incredible stock of people. The people who made a conscious decision to be able to come with me, go and to follow the direction that the Spirit of God had spoken to him to go in, and to see what is going to be the benefit of it at the end. They couldn't tell you what, I mean, you ask people, they went to Liberia for 2.5 years. They were almost starving in Liberia. Then they came to Israel, living in poverty almost. 30 people in one apartment and otherwise. And but they did that coming from Chicago, New York, and people, most people were even middle class people. Imagine that. Going from me and you are talking now about starting from the bottom and then going up. But here you have people who are already considerably up in the minds of a lot of people, but they said that they wanted to establish an actual environment. And if that environment means that they have to leave their current comfort in order to go somewhere where they're going to be extremely uncomfortable, so they can be able to create an environment that is going to be able to go back and to raise the entire people up, not just
Mm,
themselves as an individual, but this is incredible. Go back and to use this model to be able to raise an entire people up out of their current conditions, because
it's
you
amazing.
were so selfless that you were not only interested in your own individual um, progression in life, but you wanted to see better for everybody. And even in Israel, we wanted to see it better for not only for the community, but better for the Israeli society. And so what we do, we took a lot of what we had learned from being vegans and started to export that into the Israeli society. And then now today you have 14% of the Israeli society who are either vegans, vegetarians, or say that they're in between. So like I stopped eating meat and eggs, but I still like cheese. Or I stopped eating meat and cheese, but every now and then I eat an omelet. You know what I mean? The people who are still, or I don't eat meat or cheese or eggs, but I still eat fish. A lot of that was affected by what we contributed to the society of Israel. And in the 1970s, when we were talking about veganism in Israel, they called us a vegan cult that was starving their children, because they couldn't understand how some people could be able to get away from what has been conscripted as the diet for people that was just killing us, that was causing us all type of chronic ailments. We moved away from that. We established something that is much more beneficial for us. The society couldn't understand that because they were so far behind, and only now they're starting to catch up and to understand what we were talking about 50 years ago. So imagine how many more things that we've done in the community in Dimona that people still look at us in awe as like, what are you all doing? Like, this is crazy. Things that we're talking about is crazy. But then later on, once people really get an understanding of what it is we were talking about, for example, Rafi, I'm talking about the ingathering of all the Israelites. I'm not referring to us as Jews. I'm referring to us as Israelites, the whole house of Israel, the nation of Israel, Hebrews. There was a period of time when people would say that I was causing division, that I was um, trying to usurp the identity of Jews. We didn't know who we were, all this stuff. But now you have people like Rudy, for example, who are actually going and investigating a lot of what I was talking about so long ago, when people were calling me, somebody who was divisive. Now you have a lot of people who actually speak. You have Harry Rosenberg, who's actually looking into that. You have a lot of other people who are going and trying to do the research and to understand these various things that we had been talking about a long time ago. So what I'm saying is that some things that we talk about in retrospect, you see how correct we were, but it took people a long time to be able to catch up with that because the society is just not there yet. And we have to just understand the society is not going to be where we want them to be when we want them to be there, but we have to stay in alignment with what it is that we know to be true and to be right. And Rafi, I have to go because my time is up. I have in 15 minutes. I have to be somewhere else. I didn't even
No, no.
notice
So let's it. So
we
let's
were.
so let's finish it. Yeah, yeah. No, I was. It's funny because I was actually gonna say it's yeah. That's perfect. We can do another one at some point. There's plenty to discuss, man. We can discuss so much. It was such a pleasure. So let's wrap it up here, guys. You can go follow Ashriel Moore on Instagram. I'm gonna add his link in the description, but you can go to AS. I'm sorry, yeah, Ashriel. That's Ashriel Moore, Moore. Okay, you can follow him on Instagram, social media. Check him out. Check out the life of the Hebrew Israelites in Dimona, so you can see what they're up to, vegan lifestyle, all of the amazing things that they're doing. I wish you luck in Atlanta, brother. Of course, you're doing amazing things. I hope that they'll play videos of the Israelite community in like public schools, especially if African Americans can see the way your community works. I think that'd be a great way to do it, to just really push it out there so like people can see, because they have no idea that your community exists.
Right.
So I think that would be huge. Guys, follow me at Rafi the Realtor on Instagram, of course, for all of your South Florida needs. It would be awesome to help you buy, sell, rent, or invest. Also, I would love for you to join my newsletter, which I send every single week, so you can stay in the know of what's going on in the market. Of course, subscribe, like, share, leave your comments. It has been another episode of the Soothing Semantics podcast. Until next time, peace.